Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. Blake Whitman had built his life around two principles: protect those you love and never ignore your instincts. At 42, he worked as a forensic accountant, not the glamorous side of finance, but the gritty work of untangling corporate malfeasance for federal prosecutors. Numbers told stories that people try to hide, and Blake had learned to read them fluently. His daughter Maya, 13 years old with her mother's auburn hair and his own steel gray eyes, was his entire world. His wife Courtney had given him that gift 14 years ago, back when they were young and foolish and thought love could conquer anything. That afternoon in late September, Blake sat in his home office in their modest Portland suburban house, reviewing financial statements for a case involving a pharmaceutical company. Maya was at her grandparents' house, Courtney's parents, Geraldine and Warren Carlson, where she'd been spending increasing amounts of time lately. Blake had always found the Carlsons peculiar. Warren, a retired insurance executive, carried himself with the rigid posture of someone always performing for an invisible audience. Geraldine, 10 years younger than her 70-year-old husband, had the kind of calculated warmth that made Blake's investigative instincts prickle. They lived in a sprawling property in the West Hills, the kind of neighborhood where old money whispered rather than shouted. Blake had married into a family that saw him as beneath them, a scrappy kid from a broken home who'd clawed his way through community college and night classes to get his accounting degree. Courtney had defied them to marry him, but over the years, he'd watched her slowly drift back into their orbit. She worked part-time at her mother's charitable foundation, spent weekends at the estate, spoke in the measured tones of someone remembering their breeding. Blake's phone buzzed at 8:47 p.m. Maya's name appeared on the screen. He answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart, ready for me to pick you up?" Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "Dad, come get me. Bring the police." Blake's blood turned to ice. He was already standing, grabbing his keys. "Why? What happened? I can't talk. They're coming back." The line went dead. He was in his car before conscious thought caught up to action. His hands shook as he dialed 911, but something made him hang up before it connected. If Maya was in immediate danger, a patrol car would take 20 minutes. He could be there in 12 if he pushed it. And if this was something else, something that required careful handling, he needed to see it first. The speedometer hit 90 on the highway. His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Maya was smart, level-headed. She wouldn't panic over nothing. They're coming back. Who? Warren and Geraldine? Someone else? He took the exit at 60, tires squealing. The Carlson estate sat behind iron gates that stood open, unusual for 9 p.m. Blake's headlights swept across the circular driveway as he killed the engine and ran toward the house. Every window was dark except for a faint glow from the basement. The front door was unlocked. "Maya!" His voice echoed through the marble foyer. No response. Blake moved through the darkened house, his breathing loud in his ears. The basement door stood ajar, lights spilling up the stairs. He descended slowly, each step creaking under his weight. The basement had been refinished since his last visit. What had been a musty storage area was now divided into rooms with new drywall and industrial-grade doors. The first door was open. Blake stepped inside and stopped breathing. The room resembled a hospital ward. 3 hospital beds, 2 occupied by elderly people hooked to 4 drips. Medical monitors beeped softly. Both patients appeared unconscious, their breathing shallow. A metal cart held syringes, medication vials, and a laptop showing what looked like medical charts. On the wall, a whiteboard listed names, dates, and dollar amounts in Geraldine's precise handwriting. "Jesus Christ," Blake whispered. "You weren't supposed to see that." He spun around. Geraldine stood in the doorway, still wearing her pearls and cashmere cardigan, looking like she'd just stepped out of country club luncheon. Behind her, Warren's tall frame blocked the exit. "Where's Maya?" Blake's voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Safe. Unlike you, if you don't listen very carefully." Geraldine stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Warren remained outside, guard dog positioning. "We have a delicate situation here, Blake. One that requires discretion." Blake's mind was already cataloging evidence. The medical equipment, the patients who couldn't be here legally, the whiteboard with financial notations. His forensic training kicked in automatically. These people, who are they? Clients, Geraldine said smoothly. We provide end-of-life care for individuals whose families prefer privacy. It's perfectly legal. We're licensed caregivers. Blake looked at the board again. Next to each name was written trust transfer, complete, and dates within the past 6 months. His investigative instinct screamed. Clients who conveniently sign over their estates before dying in your care? That's a terrible accusation. Geraldine's smile didn't waver. These are elderly people with no remaining family, seeking comfort in their final days. We provide that service, and yes, they choose to show their gratitude. There's nothing sinister here. Then why the secret hospital room? Why is my daughter terrified? Maya has an overactive imagination. She wandered down here, saw something she didn't understand, and panicked. Children do that. Geraldine moved closer, her voice dropping to an intimate tone. Blake, you're a smart man. Surely you understand that everyone in that position, you, me, Courtney, sometimes we see opportunities others miss. Sometimes those opportunities require discretion. We could use someone with your particular skills. Someone who understands financial structures, estate planning. Someone who could make things cleaner, more efficient. She was offering him a partnership in whatever this was. Blake felt sick. I want my daughter. Now. Of course. But first, we need to reach an understanding. What you've seen here tonight, it stays here. You forget about it. Maya forgets about it. We continue as we always have. Except now you understand why certain questions shouldn't be asked. In return, well, Geraldine gestured around the room. There's considerable profit in this work. Enough that Maya could attend any college she wants. Enough that you wouldn't have to spend your life chasing pennies for prosecutors. Blake understood then. This wasn't just his in-laws. Courtney knew. Had to know. Her part-time work at the charitable foundation made 6 cents now. Identifying targets, maybe. Vulnerable elderly people with estates and no family. His wife was part of this. I need to think, he said carefully. This is a lot to process. Of course. Take the weekend. But Blake. Geraldine's eyes went cold. Make the right choice. For everyone's sake. Maya's especially. Children are so vulnerable at her age. So many things could go wrong. The threat was clear. Blake nodded slowly, playing the part of someone considering corruption. Where is she? Upstairs, Warren's study. She's fine. Just scared. Blake moved past Geraldine, climbed the stairs, and found Maya curled in a leather chair, hugging her knees. She launched herself at him, sobbing. It's okay, baby. I've got you. He held her tight, stroking her hair. Over her shoulder, he saw Warren standing in the hallway, watching them with the expression of someone calculating odds. I saw them, Dad, Maya whispered. The people. They were barely alive. And Grandma Jerry, she was doing something with her medicine. I heard her talking to someone on the phone about accelerating the timeline. What does that mean? Chill. We'll talk at home. Blake carried her out, past Geraldine, who stood at the bottom of the stairs wearing her pleasant mask, past Warren, who tracked their movement like a predator watching prey escape. In the car, Maya finally spoke. You believe me, right? I'm not imagining it. I believe you. Blake gripped the steering wheel. Did you see anything else? Any papers, names, anything? There was a file cabinet in the room next door. I saw inside before they came down, full of folders with names and papers. And Dad, one of the names was Mrs. Pemberton, from my school. She died last month. They said it was a stroke. Blake remembered. Eleanor Pemberton, wealthy widow, school board member. Her death had been sudden, but not suspicious. Except now it was. You did exactly right calling me. And you're going to do exactly right now by not saying anything about this to anyone. Not yet. Are we going to the police? Blake thought about what he'd seen. The patients were barely conscious, couldn't testify. The whiteboard could be erased in seconds. The estate transfers were probably legal on paper. The Carlsons had been doing this long enough to have lawyers and systems in place. And Courtney. He needed to know how deep her involvement went before he destroyed their daughter's mother. Soon, he said. But first, Dad needs to do what he does best. follow the money. When they got home, Courtney's car was in the driveway. She met them at the door, eyes red from crying. Thank God you're both okay. Mom called, said there was some kind of misunderstanding that Maya got scared. Stop. Blake's voice cut through her words. He turned to Maya. Go to your room. Headphones on. Music loud. Don't come out until I say. Maya nodded and fled upstairs. Blake waited until he heard her door close, then turned to his wife of 14 years. How long? He asked quietly. Courtney's face crumbled. Blake, please. It's not what you think. How long? She sank into a chair, defeated. 3 years. After Dad retired, they needed income. The insurance pension wasn't enough for their lifestyle. Mom had this idea. She'd worked in hospice care when she was younger, knew how the system worked. They started with one client, someone who genuinely wanted their end-of-life care and chose to donate their estate in gratitude. But then, she looked up at him with desperate eyes. It worked so well, and the people they help, Blake, they're alone. No family. They're going to die anyway. Why shouldn't their final days be comfortable? Why shouldn't their money go to someone instead of the state? Blake felt like he was looking at a stranger. They're murdering them, Courtney, accelerating their deaths. I saw that room. Those people weren't in end-of-life care. They were being drugged, kept compliant. No, it's palliative care, keeping them comfortable. If they die a little sooner, more peacefully, is that really so wrong? Yes. Blake's voice was ice. It's murder, premeditated, for profit, and you've been helping them. I manage the foundation. I coordinate their admissions. I make sure the paperwork is perfect. I'm not killing anyone. You're an accomplice. Blake turned away, trying to process this betrayal. Our daughter saw what you're doing. Call me terrified. And your mother threatened her to keep me quiet. What? No, Mom wouldn't. She told me that children are vulnerable, that many things could go wrong. She threatened our child, Courtney. Your daughter. Courtney stood, anger flashing. You're twisting everything. Mom was probably just worried you'd misunderstand. That I'd what? Turn you all in? Which is exactly what I'm going to do. You can't. Courtney's voice turned hard. You have no proof. Those patients are there voluntarily. The estates were transferred legally. You break privilege, try to expose this, and you'll destroy Maya's life. Her grandmother, grandfather, mother, all in prison. She'll be the girl whose family were murderers. Is that what you want for her? Blake stared at his wife, seeing the calculation in her eyes. The same cold assessment he'd seen in Geraldine's. Like mother, like daughter. You're choosing them over her. Over us. I'm choosing reality over your ridiculous moral grandstanding. We're not rich, Blake. We'll never be rich with you chasing your noble little cases for $60,000 a year. This what my parents have built. This gives Maya opportunities. Gives us security. All you have to do is look the other way. Get out. What? Get out of this house. Go back to your parents. Be with your people. Blake's voice shook with rage. But you don't touch Maya. You don't speak to her. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I'm getting sole custody based on your involvement in whatever the hell this is. Courtney's laugh was bitter. You think any court will give you custody over me? I'm a stable parent. I'm the one with the family money, the connections. You're the one making wild accusations you can't prove. Try it, Blake. Try to take her from me, and I'll make sure you're the one who ends up destroyed. She grabbed her purse and walked out. Blake heard her car start, listened to the sound fade into the night. Then he climbed the stairs to Maya's room. She was sitting on her bed, headphones around her neck, tears on her face. She'd heard everything. I'm sorry, baby. Blake sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. Is she bad? Like Grandma Jerry and Grandpa Warren? Blake thought about lying, about protecting her childhood innocence a little longer. But Maya had already seen too much. She made bad choices. Sometimes good people do that. Sometimes they get lost. Are you going to stop them? Yes. Ow! Blake looked at his daughter. Brilliant, brave, with an unflinching sense of right and wrong. The way I always do. By following the money, building the case, and making sure justice happens. But it's going to take time, and it's going to get ugly. I'm not scared, Maya said, though her voice trembled. Well, I am, but I'm more angry. Those people in the basement, they deserve better. They do. Blake pulled her close. and they're going to get it. I promise you that. After Maya fell asleep, Blake went to his office and began working. By dawn, he had a plan. It would take patience, precision, and a willingness to break a few rules himself. But the Carlsons had made a fatal mistake. They'd threatened his daughter. And Blake Whitman protected those he loved, no matter the cost. Blake Whitman hadn't slept. By the time pale October sunlight filtered through his office window, he'd filled 3 legal pads with notes and diagrams. The foundation, Serenity Transitions, incorporated 5 years ago, was registered as a nonprofit providing end-of-life services. Public filings showed modest revenue from charitable donations, but Blake knew that was just the surface. The real money would be flowing through shell accounts, trust transfers, estate settlements that never triggered proper scrutiny. He needed evidence that would stand up in court, not just what he'd seen in that basement, which could be explained away by expensive lawyers, but a pattern. Financial records showing systematic exploitation. Proof that the Carlsons weren't just providing care, but actively hastening death for profit. His phone rang at 7 a.m. Unknown number. Mr. Whitman? This is Detective Pete Gray, Portland PD. We received a concerning call last night from your in-laws about a potential custody issue. Would you be available to come down to the station? Blake's blood ran cold. They were moving fast, establishing a narrative. What kind of custody issue? I'd rather discuss it in person, sir. I'll be there at 9. Blake hung up and immediately called his lawyer, Kenny Barton, a bulldog of an attorney who'd handled his parents' messy divorce 20 years ago. Kenny was semi-retired now, but he owed Blake favors. They're painting you as unstable, Kenny said after Blake explained the situation. Classic preemptive strike. They'll claim you showed up acting erratic, making wild accusations, scared your daughter. Get ahead of this, Blake. Document everything. Record all interactions if Oregon's a one-party state, which it is. And for God's sake, be careful. If what you're saying is true, these people have killed before. Blake dropped Maya at his sister's house in Vancouver. She lived across the state line in Washington, outside the Carlsons' immediate reach. His sister Desiree, a high school chemistry teacher with a fierce protective streak, asked no questions when Blake told her it was an emergency. How long? Desiree asked at her doorway. A week. Maybe 2. She can't go to school. Can't contact Courtney or her grandparents. That bad. Worse. Desiree pulled him into a quick hug. Whatever you're doing, be smart. Maya needs her dad. At the police station, Detective Gray turned out to be a weary man in his 50s with the slumped shoulders of someone who'd seen too much. He led Blake to an interview room. The Carlsons claim you forcibly removed their granddaughter from their home last night, that you were acting paranoid and aggressive. They're worried about Maya's safety. Blake pulled out his phone, called up the recording app. Detective, I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to record this conversation for my protection. Is that acceptable? Gray's eyes sharpened with interest. This official? Not yet, but it will be. Blake laid it out carefully. The phone call from Maya. What he'd found in the basement. Geraldine's offer and threat. He kept his voice level, his fact precise. When he finished, Gray was leaning forward. You're alleging that Warren and Geraldine Carlson are operating a murder-for-profit scheme? I'm alleging that they're providing unlicensed medical care in unsupervised conditions, hastening the deaths of vulnerable elderly people who have signed over their estates. I'm a forensic accountant, detective. I work fraud cases for the federal prosecutor's office. This is a sophisticated financial crime wrapped in a care facility. But you didn't call 911 last night. No, I made a judgment call. My daughter was terrified. I was 12 minutes away, and I knew a patrol car would take longer. In retrospect, I should have called for backup. But I'm calling now officially. Gray drummed his fingers on the table. Problem is, we can't just raid someone's home based on your word, even with your credentials. The Carlsons are respected members of the community. Serenity Transitions has glowing reviews, proper licensing. We need a warrant, and for that, we need probable cause. Then let me get you probable cause. Blake pulled out a flash drive. I spent last night pulling public records on every person who's died under Serenity Transitions care in the past 3 years. 23 people. All elderly, all wealthy, all without close family. All signed to state transfers within 2 weeks of entering care. Average time from admission to death, 45 days. Detective, that's not hospice care. That's systematized murder. Gray took the flash drive, his expression grim. I'll need to run this up the chain. Elder abuse, potential homicide. This goes to the DA's office. But Mr. Whitman, until we have a case, you need to stay away from the Carlsons. No contact, and keep your daughter somewhere safe. Already done. As Blake left the station, his phone buzzed. Text from Courtney. We need to talk about Maya. Where is she? He didn't respond. Instead, he drove to the county clerk's office and filed for divorce, requesting an emergency custody hearing. Then he went to his office downtown and told his boss he needed 2 weeks leave. Family emergency, he said, which was true enough. His boss, Milton Dickerson, a gray-haired man who'd mentored Blake through his early career, studied him with concern. This related to that pharmaceutical case you're working? No. Personal matter. Blake, you've got 30 days of vacation saved up. Take them. And if you need help, legal or otherwise, you've got resources here. Don't forget that. Blake spent the next 3 days building his case. He interviewed former employees of Serenity Transitions carefully without revealing his connection. A nurse named Christine Michael, who'd quit after 2 months, described a place where medication protocols were flexible and where Geraldine Carlson made all decisions regardless of medical advice. She's not a doctor, but she acted like one. Christine sat over coffee in a small diner. There was this one patient, Mr. Whitfield. He was actually improving, getting stronger. His daughter wanted to take him home. Next day, he had a massive stroke. Died within hours. Jerry called it a blessing, said he would have suffered. But I saw his charts before and after. The medication changes didn't make sense. Why didn't you report it? Christine looked away. I tried. Called the state licensing board. They investigated, found nothing wrong. The Carlsons have connections, Mr. Whitman. Political donations, charity work. They're protected. I got labeled a disgruntled employee, struggled to find work for 6 months. Eventually, I just moved on. Blake recorded everything, documented every conversation. By day 6, he had 15 interviews, hundreds of pages of financial records, and a timeline showing systematic exploitation. He also had something else, fear. The Carlsons had to know he was building a case. They were too smart, too careful, which meant they were planning something. He called Kenny Barton. I need protection. Legal immunity if I have to do something questionable. Blake, don't do anything stupid. I'm not. But if they come after Maya, if they try to hurt her or make me look unfit, I need to know I can defend myself. Self-defense is always legal. Beyond that, you're on your own. Blake, listen to me. You're a good man. Don't become what they are. That night, Blake sat in his darkened living room, thinking about Kenny's words. He wasn't planning to become a murderer, but he was planning something that would destroy the Carlsons just as thoroughly. He was going to use their own system against them, trap them in the elegant mechanism they'd built to exploit others. His phone rang. Detective Gray. We've got problems, Gray said without preamble. The DA's office won't move forward. The Carlsons' lawyers buried us in documentation showing everything was legal and above board. Medical licenses, patient consent forms, estate transfers that were reviewed by independent attorneys. They've got a judge on retainer who signed off on everything. Blake felt his plan crumbling. What about the patients I saw? The ones in the basement. Visited the property with a welfare check. All patients accounted for, properly cared for, with full documentation. Geraldine Carlson was very cooperative. She even suggested that perhaps you'd been under stress, that the scene looked worse than it was due to your emotional state. That's bullshit. Those people were barely conscious. They're on hospice care, Blake. Heavily medicated for pain management. All prescribed by licensed physicians. Look, I believe something's wrong there. My gut says you're right. But belief doesn't get warrants. We need hard evidence that a crime occurred. And right now, all we have is your word against theirs. After Gray hung up, Blake sat in the darkness and accepted a hard truth. The legal system wasn't going to save those people. The Carlsons had insulated themselves too well, which meant Blake would have to step outside the law. Not far, just far enough to give the law something it couldn't ignore. He opened his laptop and began planning. The Carlsons had taught him something important last week. Everyone had vulnerabilities. Everyone had secrets they'd kill to protect. And Blake Whitman was very good at finding secrets. 2 days later, Blake received the call he'd been waiting for. Courtney's lawyer requesting a custody hearing. The Carlsons were escalating, trying to separate him from Maya by legal means. The hearing was set for the following Monday. Blake called Desiree. "How's Maya?" "Scared. Angry. She asks about you every hour." "Blake, what the hell is happening?" "I'm fixing it. Keep her safe for 3 more days. And if Courtney shows up with cops and a custody order, don't open the door. Call me immediately. Desiree, I need you to trust me." His sister was quiet for a long moment. "Like when we were kids and you stole Dad's car to drive me to the hospital when I broke my arm. That kind of trust." "Exactly that kind. Then I'm in. Whatever you need." Blake spent Sunday preparing. He dressed in his best suit, reviewed his documentation, and practiced his testimony. But he also prepared something else, an insurance policy. Because he'd learned long ago that sometimes you had to fight dirty to win clean. Monday morning, Blake walked into the courthouse with Kenny Barton at his side. Courtney sat across the aisle with her parents and their attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Laverne Minor who had a reputation for destroying opposing witnesses. Maya sat in the waiting area outside, under court supervision. The judge, an older woman named Charlotte Hess, reviewed the preliminary motions with obvious impatience. This is highly irregular. Emergency custody hearings require evidence of immediate danger. Laverne stood smoothly. "Your Honor, will demonstrate that Mr. Whitman has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior, culminating in the forcible removal of the child from her grandparents' home based on delusional accusations. We're seeking temporary custody to ensure the child's safety while Mr. Whitman undergoes psychiatric evaluation." Blake felt Kenny tense beside him, but he stayed calm. This was expected. Let them make their play. For the next hour, the Carlsons' attorney painted Blake as a man on the edge of breakdown. Courtney testified tearfully about his paranoid accusations, his refusal to seek help, his obsession with conspiracy theories. Warren described Blake showing up at their home, wild-eyed and incoherent. Geraldine played the concerned grandmother perfectly, voice trembling as she worried about her precious granddaughter's well-being. Then Kenny stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Carlson, you operate Serenity Transitions, correct?" "I do. A nonprofit providing compassionate end-of-life care. And over the past 3 years, 23 patients have died in your care. Is that accurate?" Geraldine's smile never wavered. "Tragically, yes. End-of-life care means we help people in their final days. Death is inevitable. These 23 people, did they all sign over significant portions of their estates to you before dying?" "Some chose to show their gratitude, yes. It's not uncommon in hospice care. An average of $1.3 million per patient. That seems like substantial gratitude." "Objection," Laverne said. "Relevance? We're discussing custody, not Mrs. Carlson's charitable work." Kenny turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the Carlsons are claiming Mr. Whitman is delusional. I'm establishing that he had reasonable cause for his concerns." Judge Hess frowned. "I'll allow it, but make your point quickly, Mr. Barton." Kenny pulled out a document. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, a sworn statement from Christine Michael, former nurse at Serenity Transitions, describing questionable medical practices, including unauthorized medication changes and premature patient deaths." The courtroom went still. Blake watched Geraldine's face, the first crack in her composure. "I'd also like to submit Exhibit B, financial records showing systematic estate transfers for vulnerable patients to the Carlson family trusts. And Exhibit C, testimony from Eleanor Pemberton's nephew, who was cut out of his aunt's will 2 weeks before her death after she entered Serenity Transitions care." Laverne was on her feet. "Your Honor, this is character assassination. None of this has been proven. These are allegations from disgruntled individuals with axes to grind." "Perhaps," Kenny said, "but they established that Mr. Whitman's concerns weren't delusional. They were investigative. Your Honor, my client is a forensic accountant with the federal prosecutor's office. Identifying financial crimes is literally his job. When he saw something suspicious at his in-laws' facility, he responded appropriately. Judge Hess looked between the attorneys, then at Blake. Mr. Whitman, did you witness anything illegal at the Carlson residence? Blake stood. I witnessed what appeared to be unsupervised medical care of incapacitated individuals in a residential basement. I saw financial notations suggesting estate planning contingent on death dates. I heard my mother-in-law threaten my daughter to ensure my silence. Your Honor, I'm not delusional. I'm a father protecting his child from people I believe to be dangerous. The judge was quiet for a long moment. I'm not prepared to rule on custody today. However, I am ordering a full investigation by the state licensing board into Serenity Transitions. Until that investigation concludes, temporary custody remains with Mr. Whitman, with supervised visitation rights for Mrs. Whitman pending completion of a family evaluation. We'll reconvene in 30 days. Blake felt the tension drain from his shoulders. Not victory, but not defeat. 30 days to build an ironclad case. As they filed out of the courtroom, Geraldine caught his arm in the hallway. Her grandmother mask was gone, replaced by cold fury. You made a mistake today, Blake. Coming after us publicly. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Blake met her eyes steadily. Actually, Geraldine, I do. I've spent the last 2 weeks learning exactly who you are, and you're not nearly as protected as you think. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You threatened my daughter. That was your mistake. That evening, Blake picked up Maya from Desiree's house. She threw herself into his arms, and he held her tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Did we win? She asked. We're winning, he said, but it's not over yet. As they drove home, Blake's phone rang. Unknown number again. He answered on speaker. Mr. Whitman? This is Fernando Bass. I'm an attorney representing the Carlson family. We'd like to discuss a settlement. Blake's lips curved into a smile. They were scared. I'm listening. My clients are willing to cease all operations of Serenity Transitions immediately and cooperate with any investigation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Additionally, they'll establish a trust fund for Maya's education, $2 million, and Mrs. Whitman will agree to joint custody with minimal financial support requirements. In exchange, you withdraw all accusations, cease your investigation, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Blake looked at Maya, who was watching him with wide eyes. $2 million. Her college paid for, her future secured. All he had to do was let murderers walk free. Tell your clients to go to hell, Blake said and hung up. Maya squeezed his hand. Good, good. You can't let them buy you off, Dad. That's what bad people do. They think everything has a price. Blake pulled over, turned to face his daughter. Maya, that money could have changed your life. My life is already good. I have you. Those people in the basement, they deserve someone to fight for them. You're doing that. She paused. That's worth more than money. Blake felt tears prick his eyes. When had his little girl become so wise? You're right. But baby, this is going to get harder before it gets better. They're going to fight back. Let them, Maya said fiercely. We're stronger. As Blake pulled back onto the road, he made a decision. The Carlsons wanted to play hardball? He'd show them what a forensic accountant with nothing to lose could really do. Because they'd taught him something important. Everyone had vulnerabilities. Everyone had secrets. And Blake Whitman was about to expose all of theirs. Blake Whitman spent the next week transforming into someone he barely recognized. The man who'd always colored within legal lines, who'd built a career on procedure and protocol, was gone. In his place was someone who understood that sometimes justice required darker methods. He started by following the money, not just the obvious estate transfers, but the intricate web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and dummy trusts the Carlsons had woven. Working 18-hour days, he traced every transaction, every transfer, every carefully laundered dollar. What he found was staggering. Serenity Transitions was just the visible part. Beneath it lay a network of related entities, real estate holding companies, medical supply corporations, even a funeral home. The Carlsons had vertically integrated their murder business, controlling every aspect from admission to burial. Patients who entered their care didn't just die. They were systematically stripped of assets, their estates flowing through channels that ended in Carlson-controlled accounts. But the most damning discovery came from an unexpected source. Lorenzo Kuhn, an attorney who'd handled estate transfers for the Carlsons, reached out through an anonymous email. They met in a parking garage downtown, Kuhn nervously chain-smoking. "I can't be connected to this," Kuhn said immediately. "I've got a family, a career, but I can't sleep anymore, knowing what I helped them do." "Tell me," Blake said quietly. "The patients, they didn't all willingly sign those estate transfers. Some were heavily sedated when I came to witness signatures. Others had clearly been coached, repeating phrases that sounded scripted. There was this one woman, Ada Woodruff. She kept asking where her daughter was, said her daughter would never allow this. Geraldine told me the daughter was dead, that Ada was confused. But Ada was lucid, insistent. I looked into it later. The daughter lived in Seattle, very much alive. By the time I reached out to her, Ada was dead." Blake felt his rage crystallize into something cold and focused. "Will you testify to this? Not officially, but I'll give you copies of everything. The files, the contracts, my notes. You can use them however you need, just keep my name out of it." Blake took the flash drive Kuhn offered. "Why now? Why reach out after all this time?" Kuhn's face twisted with shame. "Because I heard they were going after your daughter. Heard Geraldine talking to Warren about how to use custody courts to break you, make you drop the investigation. I got a daughter too. If anyone threatened her." He shook his head. "Some lines you don't cross." That evening, Blake sat with Maya at their dining room table. Chinese takeout containers spread between them. She was doing homework, geometry proofs, while he reviewed Kuhn's files. The normalcy felt surreal given what they were facing. "Dad," Maya looked up from her textbook. "When this is over, when you stop them, what happens to us?" Blake set down his papers. "What do you mean?" "Mom, Grandma, and Grandpa. They're going to jail, right? If you prove what they did." "Probably. Yes. And everyone at school will know. I'll be the girl whose family are murderers." Her voice was small, scared. "I'll be damaged goods." Blake moved around the table, crouched beside her chair. "Listen to me. You're not damaged. You didn't do anything wrong. You're the one who had the courage to call for help, to do the right thing even when it was terrifying. That makes you brave, Maya. That makes you good. But people won't see it that way. They'll see my last name and make assumptions." Blake thought about his own childhood, the assumptions people made about kids from broken homes, from neighborhoods like his. The way teachers had looked at him with lowered expectations, the way Courtney's friends had whispered about him being rough around the edges. Maya was right. The world made assumptions. "Then we'll prove them wrong," he said firmly. "We'll show them who you really are. And anyone who judges you based on other people's crimes isn't worth your time anyway." Maya leaned into his shoulder. "I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad you're my daughter." Blake held her, thinking about how close he'd come to losing this. Losing her to the Carlsons' threats. That thought fueled his determination. The following Monday, Blake implemented phase 2 of his plan. He couldn't take down the Carlsons through legal channels alone. They corrupted too many systems, bought too much protection. But he could expose them to something they couldn't control: public outrage. He'd spent years building relationships with journalists who covered financial crimes. Now he called in those favors. He met with Dwayne Sanders, an investigative reporter for the Oregon Tribune who'd built a career on exposing corruption. They met at Powell's Books, lost in the maze of shelves, speaking quietly. "You're handing me the story of the decade," Dwayne said, flipping through the evidence Blake provided. "Elder abuse, murder for profit, corrupted legal system. But you understand what happens when I publish this? Your family gets dragged through the mud. Your daughter's name gets plastered everywhere. Use initials. MW, a 13-year-old witness. Protect her identity. I can try. But in a case this high profile, with court records and public filings, someone will connect the dots." Blake had anticipated this. Then make sure the story is so overwhelming, so focused on the victims, that Maya becomes a footnote. Make the Carlsons the villains they are. Give the victims names, faces, stories. Make people care about them more than they care about scandal. Dwayne studied him. "You've thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else." The article ran that Thursday. The Tribune devoted 6 pages to it, above the fold, with a devastating headline: "Death for Dollars. How one Portland family built a murder empire on the vulnerable. Dwayne had done exactly what Blake asked. The piece focused on the victims: Eleanor Pemberton, grandmother and school board member; Robert Kim, retired professor; Ada Woodruff, who died asking for a daughter who was never contacted. Their faces stared out from a page, their stories told with compassion and fury. The Carlsons were named, their financial records exposed, their pattern of exploitation laid bare. Christine Michael was quoted, as were 3 other former employees. Lorenzo Kuhn's documents formed the backbone of the legal analysis, though his name never appeared. And buried deep in the article, almost as an afterthought, the alleged criminal enterprise was discovered when a family member, a forensic accountant, became suspicious of irregularities and contacted authorities. By Friday morning, the story had gone viral. National news picked it up. Cable networks ran segments. The Oregon Attorney General announced a formal investigation. The FBI opened a case file: financial crimes, wire fraud, potential RICO charges. Blake watched it unfold from his home office, feeling something like satisfaction mixed with sorrow. This was justice, but it came at a cost. His phone rang constantly: journalists, lawyers, former colleagues. He ignored most of them. Courtney called at noon. He answered. "You destroyed them," she said, her voice hollow. "They're ruined. The foundation is shut down, their accounts frozen. Mom can't leave the house without reporters mobbing her. Dad had a stress-induced heart episode this morning. He's in the hospital." "Good," Blake said flatly. "Good? Blake, they're my parents. They're murderers, Courtney. And you help them." Silence. "Then, I want to see Maya." "No, she's my daughter too." "And when the FBI comes calling with immunity offers for cooperation, are you going to protect her? Or are you going to save yourself by testifying against your parents and dragging her through that nightmare?" More silence. Blake had his answer. "I thought so," he said. "Maya stays with me. When this is over, when you figure out who you are without your parents pulling your strings, maybe we can revisit visitation. Until then, stay away from her." He hung up as Courtney started crying. That evening, Detective Pete Gray came to Blake's house. They sat on the back deck, watching the sun set through the trees. "Hell of a thing you did," Gray said, sipping the beer Blake offered. "FBI's all over this now. They've got forensic accountants, your former colleagues, actually tearing through every Carlson asset. State AG is bringing charges. This is going to be the biggest criminal case in Oregon in a decade." "Will they go to prison?" Blake asked. "Oh yeah, multiple counts of fraud, elder abuse, potential murder charges. They're looking at life sentences." Gray paused. "Your wife might cut a deal, though. She wasn't directly involved in the medical side. Prosecutors might offer immunity for testimony." Blake had considered that. Courtney's betrayal stung, but she wasn't a murderer. Just weak, greedy, willing to look away from horror for comfort. That's her choice to make. And you? How are you holding up? Blake thought about that. He destroyed his marriage, shattered his daughter's family, exposed his in-laws as killers. His career as a federal forensic accountant was probably over. Too much publicity, too much controversy. But Maya was safe. The victims would get justice. The Carlsons would pay. "I'm holding," he said simply. After Gray left, Blake found Maya in her room, laptop open, scrolling through news articles. She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "They're saying such awful things about Mom." Blake sat on her bed. "They're saying true things. But she's still my mom. I still love her. Does that make me bad?" "No, baby. It makes you human. Love doesn't shut off just because someone disappoints us." Blake took her hand. "Your mom made terrible choices. She hurt people. But that doesn't erase the mom who read you stories at bedtime, who taught you to ride a bike, who loves you in her own broken way. Can I see her? Not yet, but soon. When things settle, when the legal stuff is sorted out. I'm not trying to keep you from her, Maya. I'm trying to protect you from the chaos." "Okay." Maya closed her laptop. "Dad, are we going to be okay? Financially, I mean. With you not working, with everything." Blake hadn't told her, but he'd been suspended from his federal position pending the outcome of the investigation. Standard procedure when an employee became this entangled in a case. Money would be tight. "We'll figure it out." We always do. Can I get a job? I'm old enough to do stuff after school. Absolutely not. Your job is to be 13. To do your homework, hang out with friends, be a kid. I'll handle the adult stuff. Maya studied him seriously. You're not going to lose the house, are you? Blake wanted to lie, to reassure her. But they'd been through too much for dishonesty. I don't know. Maybe. But we'll land on our feet. I promise you that. I don't care about the house, Maya said fiercely. I care about you. About us. As long as we're together, I don't care where we live. Blake pulled her into a hug, feeling his heart crack open with love and pain. When did you get so wise? Learn from my dad, she said into his shoulder. The weeks that followed were brutal. The Carlsons were arrested, Geraldine first. Perp walked out of her mansion in handcuffs while cameras rolled. Warren followed 2 days later, released from the hospital into federal custody. They pled not guilty, hired expensive lawyers, fought every charge. Courtney took the immunity deal. Blake heard through Kenny that she'd spent 6 hours in a conference room with prosecutors, giving up everything she knew about her parents' operation. It would save her from prison, but destroy any remaining relationship with the Carlsons. The trial date was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, Blake's life contracted to a small routine, taking care of Maya, preparing testimony, rebuilding. Milton Dickerson reached out with a consulting offer, reviewing the Carlson financial records for the prosecution, paid hourly. It wasn't his old salary, but enough to keep them afloat. 3 months after the arrests, Blake and Maya moved out of their house. It was too big, too expensive, too full of memories. They found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a good school district. Maya decorated her room with posters and string lights, making it her own. Blake found he didn't miss the house at all. One Saturday morning, Blake was making pancakes when someone knocked on their apartment door. He looked through the peephole and saw Courtney standing in the hallway, holding a small gift bag. He opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see Maya. I know I don't have the right, but it's her birthday tomorrow, and Courtney's voice broke. She looked terrible, gaunt, aged, worn down by the weight of what she'd done. "Please, Blake, 5 minutes, just to give her this." Blake considered refusing. Then he thought about Maya, asking if she'd ever see her mother again. "Wait here." He found Maya in her room. "Your mom's at the door. She wants to say happy birthday. You don't have to see her if you don't want to." Maya bit her lip, then nodded. "I want to." Blake led her to the door, stayed close as Courtney crouched down to Maya's level despite Maya being nearly as tall as her now. "Hi, baby," Courtney said, tears streaming down her face. "Happy birthday. You're 14. God, you're so grown up." "Hi, Mom." Maya's voice was cautious, hurt. "I brought you something. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but..." Courtney held out the gift bag. Maya took it, pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a small compass pendant. "I got it years ago, meant to give it to you when you were older," Courtney said. "It's supposed to help you find your way home. I thought, even if you don't think of me as home anymore, maybe you'll remember that I love you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Maya held the necklace, her own tears falling now. "Why did you do it, Mom? Why did you choose them over us?" "Because I'm weak," Courtney said simply. "Because I was scared of disappointing my parents, of not being enough. Because I told myself it wasn't that bad, that those people were dying anyway, that it didn't really matter. I was wrong about all of it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better, trying to deserve you, even if I never get the chance to be your mom again." Maya threw her arms around Courtney, sobbing. Blake watched them, feeling his own tears threaten. Whatever else Courtney was, she was Maya's mother. And Maya needed this. Needed to believe her mother was more than just a criminal, more than just complicit in horror. After 5 minutes, Blake gently separated them. "Time to go, Courtney." Courtney nodded, wiped her eyes. "Thank you for letting me see her. Blake, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but thank you for protecting her, for being what I couldn't be. Take care of yourself," was all Blake could manage. After Courtney left, Maya put on the necklace. She wore it every day after that, even to the trial. The trial lasted 4 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, Financial records, witness testimony, medical documentation showing systematic abuse. The defense tried to argue that the Carlsons genuinely believed they were helping people, that any financial benefit was incidental. No one bought it. Blake testified for 6 hours, walking the jury through the financial trail that proved premeditated, systematic exploitation. Maya testified too, briefly, describing what she'd seen that night. The defense attorneys didn't cross-examine her. Even they understood that attacking a teenage witness would alienate the jury. The verdict came back on a Tuesday afternoon, guilty on all counts. Geraldine showed no emotion. Warren wept. They were sentenced 2 weeks later. 40 years each, no possibility of parole. Blake and Maya stood outside the courthouse afterward, reporters shouting questions. Blake ignored them all, put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, and walked away. Is it over? Maya asked quietly. The trial is, Blake said. The rest, the healing, the moving forward, that's just beginning. Good, Maya said. I'm ready. As they walked to their car, Blake felt the weight of the past months begin to lift. Not gone. It would never be fully gone, but lighter. Manageable. He'd done what he set out to do. Protected his daughter, brought justice to the victims, stopped the people who'd thought themselves untouchable. It had cost him his marriage, his house, his career. But looking down at Maya, resilient and brave and good despite everything she'd been through, Blake knew he'd make the same choices again. Because in the end, protecting those you love was the only thing that really mattered. And Blake Whitman had protected his daughter. He'd kept his promise. That was enough. 4 years later, Blake Whitman stood in a high school auditorium, watching his daughter walk across the stage to receive her diploma. Maya had graduated with honors, earned a full scholarship to Reed College where she planned to study social work. Helping vulnerable people, she'd said, making sure no one else fell through the cracks like the Carlsons' victims had. Desiree sat beside Blake, dabbing at her eyes. She's incredible. You raised an incredible kid. We raised her, Blake corrected. Desiree had been there through everything, helping with school pickups and late-night homework sessions when Blake had been drowning in testimony prep and legal proceedings. After the ceremony, Maya found them in the crowd, her face glowing with joy. She'd grown into a confident young woman, no longer the frightened 13-year-old who'd whispered into the phone for help. She still wore the compass necklace her mother had given her, a reminder of complicated truths, of love that existed alongside betrayal, of the long road to forgiveness. Blake hugged her tight. Proud of you, sweetheart. Couldn't have done it without you, Dad. As they walked to the car, Blake's phone rang. An unknown number, but he answered anyway. He'd stopped being paranoid about calls years ago. Mr. Whitman? This is Neil Plummer from Victims Advocacy Group. We've been following your case for years now, and we'd like to offer you a position. We need someone with your investigative skills to help identify and prosecute elder abuse cases nationally. The pay isn't great, but the work is meaningful. Blake looked at Maya, who was laughing with friends, making plans for graduation parties. He thought about the victims whose faces still haunted his dreams sometimes. Eleanor Pemberton, Ada Woodruff, all the others. Thought about how many more were out there, vulnerable to predators who looked respectable, who hid behind legitimacy. I'd like to hear more, Blake said. They discussed details, position requirements, salary, travel expectations. It would mean long hours again, difficult cases, confronting ugliness. But it would also mean using what he'd learned, helping others the way he'd helped Maya. After he hung up, Maya looked at him questioningly. New job? Maybe. Investigating elder abuse cases. Doing what I did with your grandparents, but on a bigger scale. Maya's expression grew serious. You'd be good at that. You'd save people. It would mean less time at home, more travel. Dad, I'm going to college in 3 months. I don't need you to hover anymore. She squeezed his hand. Do something that matters. You've earned that. Blake pulled her close. You matter. You're what matters most. I know, but I'm okay now. We both are. And those people out there who need help, they need you more than I do right now. As they drove home, Blake reflected on the journey from that dark night 4 years ago. The terror of his daughter's whispered call. The horror of what he discovered. The long, brutal process of bringing the Carlsons to justice. Geraldine and Warren were in federal prison, their empire dismantled, their wealth distributed to victim compensation funds. 23 families had received settlements. Not enough to bring back their loved ones, but something. Acknowledgement. Justice. Courtney had rebuilt a quiet life in Seattle, working as a paralegal, attending therapy, slowly reestablishing a relationship with Maya through supervised visits that had gradually become easier, more natural. She'd never fully escaped what she'd done, but she was trying. That counted for something. And Blake had survived. More than survived. He'd become someone stronger, someone who knew what he was capable of when pushed to the edge. He'd learned that sometimes the law wasn't enough, that sometimes you had to color outside the lines to make things right. He'd learned that he could lose everything except what mattered most and still be okay. The following Monday, Blake accepted the position with Victims Advocacy Group. He started 2 weeks later, diving into a case involving a nursing home in Idaho where financial irregularities suggested another predatory operation. The work was familiar, satisfying, meaningful. Maya started college that fall. She called Blake every Sunday, sharing stories about her classes, her friends, her growing passion for advocacy work. She was thriving. On the anniversary of that terrible night, 5 years after Maya's whispered call for help, Blake drove to the cemetery where several of the Carlsons' victims were buried. He brought flowers, placed them at each grave, spoke quiet apologies for not finding them in time. At Ada Woodruff's headstone, he paused longest. Her daughter had reached out to Blake after the trial, thanking him for exposing the truth. "Mom would have liked you," she'd said. She always appreciated people who did the right thing, no matter the cost. Blake thought about costs. His marriage, his original career, the comfortable suburban life he'd built. All gone. But in their place, Maya's safety. Justice for 23 victims. A new career helping others. The knowledge that when it mattered most, he'd chosen right over easy. His phone buzzed. Text from Maya. "Love you, Dad. Thanks for being you." Blake smiled, typed back. "Love you more. Always." As he walked back to his car, Blake thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago, confident in systems, in rules, in the belief that following procedure was enough. That man was gone, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes the right path meant stepping into darkness, meant risking everything, meant becoming a little bit ruthless to protect what mattered. He'd broken rules, manipulated media, pushed legal boundaries, used his skills to not just build a case, but to destroy people who'd thought themselves untouchable. He wasn't proud of all of it, but he was proud of the results. Because Blake Whitman had learned something essential that night his daughter called for help. When faced with true evil, when protecting those you love, there is no such thing as going too far. There is only going far enough. And Blake Whitman had gone exactly far enough. He'd kept his promise to Maya. He brought down the Carlsons. He'd made sure no one else would suffer at their hands. And in doing so, he discovered something about himself. A core of steel, an unwavering determination, a willingness to do whatever it took. That knowledge would serve him well in the years to come, in the cases he'd investigate, in the predators he'd expose, in the victims he'd help. Because now he knew, when it mattered most, Blake Whitman would always choose justice over comfort, protection over peace, doing right over being safe. And that made all the difference. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Architect of Certainty. Carson Erickson had built his life on patterns. As a forensic accountant specializing in divorce cases, he'd spent 12 years following paper trails that led to motel receipts, secret bank accounts, and tearful confessions. He'd seen every variation of betrayal, documented every creative lie, and testified in enough courtrooms to recognize the moment someone's carefully constructed fiction fell apart. which made it all the more ironic that he'd missed the fiction in his own home. Their house in Bellevue sat on a quiet cul-de-sac where neighbors waved but didn't pry. Carson had chosen it specifically for that reason 5 years ago, when he'd married Paige Krause. She'd been a pharmaceutical sales rep then, bright, ambitious, with a laugh that made him forget the darkness of his work. They'd met at a charity gala where she was networking and he was avoiding small talk by the bar. "You look like someone killed your dog," she'd said, sliding onto the stool beside him. Worse, someone killed their prenup by hiding assets in their mistress's name. He'd swirled his scotch. "I spent 3 weeks proving it. Sounds depressing. It's honest work. Someone has to make sure the truth comes out." She'd smiled at that. "I like honest men." The courtship had been straightforward. Paige was direct about wanting stability after years of traveling for work. Carson appreciated her pragmatism. No games, no drama. Just two adults building something reliable. They'd married at the courthouse with 2 colleagues as witnesses, then honeymooned in Vancouver. For 5 years, it had worked. Paige transitioned to a regional position with less travel. Carson made partner at his firm, Blackwell and Associates, working under the legendary Harley Blackwell, a silver-haired bulldog who taught him everything about following money. They had date nights on Thursdays, visited Paige's sister Jana Krause in Portland once a month, and talked vaguely about starting a family when things settled down. Carson should have noticed when things already had settled down, but Paige kept moving the goalpost. The first crack appeared 3 months ago, though Carson only recognized it in hindsight. Paige had started coming home later, explaining that her new colleague Gregorio McGrath needed help learning their territory. Carson had nodded, trusting, because that's what you did when you married someone honest. Then came the business trips. Weekend conferences that seemed excessive for a regional rep. Carson had mentioned it once, casually, and Paige had laughed it off. The pharmaceutical world is cutthroat. You know how it is, FaceTime with the higher-ups matters. He'd accepted it because he wanted to, because the alternative meant becoming the kind of person who checked phone records and followed their spouse. Carson hunted lies for a living. He refused to bring that poison home. But the universe has a cruel sense of humor. On a rainy Tuesday in November, Carson's world began unraveling in the most mundane way possible. He was lying in bed at 2:17 a.m., having just returned from the bathroom, when Paige's phone lit up on her nightstand. She slept facing away from it, dead to the world after 2 glasses of wine at dinner. The screen glowed with a text message. "It's done." Carson stared at those 2 words. In his line of work, "it's done" meant one of 3 things: a transfer completed, evidence destroyed, or a plan executed. None of them good when received at 2 a.m. His rational mind offered explanations. Work emergency, friend's crisis, delayed message. But his professional instinct, the one that had made him the best forensic accountant in the Pacific Northwest, screamed that something was wrong. He picked up Paige's phone. No passcode. She'd always said she had nothing to hide. The message was from a number with no name attached. Against every principle he held, Carson opened her recent calls. 15 calls to the same unknown number over the past week. Some lasting 40 minutes. All made when she claimed to be in conferences or driving home late. Carson's hand steadied. This was what he did. He investigated. He stepped into the hallway, closed the bedroom door, and dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Then a man's voice, smooth and confident. "Did she tell you yet?" Carson's throat tightened. "Tell me what?" The laugh that came through the phone was rich with amusement. "Oh, this is perfect." "She hasn't." "Man, you're even more clueless than she said." A pause. "Check her car trunk. Then you'll understand everything." The line went dead. Carson stood in the dark hallway, phone pressed to his ear, listening to silence. His mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Drugs, stolen property, evidence of. He forced himself to stop. Speculation was useless. He needed facts. Paige's Audi was parked in the garage. Carson descended the stairs, moving quietly out of habit rather than necessity. The garage was cold, smelling of motor oil and lawn chemicals. He popped the trunk with the release button inside the car. The overhead light revealed what appeared to be an ordinary trunk. spare tire, emergency kit, reusable grocery bags. Carson almost laughed at the anticlimax until he noticed the gym bag tucked behind the tire iron. It was new. Paige didn't go to the gym. He unzipped it with steady hands, his professional calm overriding the husband's panic. Inside, he found a stack of documents in a manila folder, a burner phone, and a thumb drive. Carson pulled out the documents first. The top sheet was a photocopy of a life insurance policy in his name. $2 million, with Paige as the sole beneficiary. He'd signed it 3 years ago at her suggestion. Just in case, honey. We need to protect each other. Beneath, it was a medical report from a clinic in Tacoma. Patient, Carson Erickson. Diagnosis, severe peanut allergy. Prescribed, EpiPen, emergency protocol. Carson's blood went cold. He didn't have a peanut allergy. The next document was a receipt from a compounding pharmacy in Seattle, dated 2 weeks ago. Custom prescription filled. Patient name, Carson Erickson. No details on the medication itself. His hand was shaking now as he opened the burner phone. One contact saved, G. One text thread, G. The pharmacist came through. No taste dissolves completely. Start with small doses. Paige, how long until it looks natural? G. 6 months of gradual poisoning, then acute exposure. Paramedics will see anaphylaxis. Never question it. You'll be a grieving widow with a fat insurance payout. Paige, what about the investigation? G. That's the beauty. He investigates financial fraud, not medical deaths. And his firm won't look twice at a tragic allergy accident. Paige, when do we leave? G. 2 weeks after the funeral. Costa Rica has no extradition for this. We'll live like royalty. The messages continued, detailing a 6-month timeline of slowly introducing synthesized allergens into Carson's food, building sensitivity, creating the medical history to make his death look like a tragic accident. Carson's legs gave out. He sat on the cold garage floor, documents scattered around him, trying to process that his wife, the woman who'd said she liked honest men, had been systematically poisoning him for months. The thumb drive was last. He pocketed it along with the burner phone and documents, then carefully reassembled the gym bag exactly as he'd found it. Back in the house, Carson didn't return to the bedroom. He sat at his desk in the home office, booted up his laptop, and inserted the thumb drive. It contained bank records, travel itineraries, and a spreadsheet tracking his symptoms over the past 90 days. Fatigue, headaches, occasional dizziness. Paige had been so solicitous, urging him to see a doctor, making appointments he'd canceled due to work. He'd attributed it to stress, long hours, aging, never suspecting his body was being turned into evidence for his own murder. The bank records showed Paige had opened an account in the Cayman Islands 2 years ago. Monthly deposits from a shell corporation called Meridian Health Consultants. Carson recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same structure he'd uncovered dozens of times in divorce cases. Money laundering dressed up as legitimate business income. The corporation's registered agent was Gregorio McGrath, pharmaceutical sales rep, Paige's colleague. Carson pulled McGrath's background. Former medical sales, fired from 2 companies for ethical violations involving kickbacks and falsified prescription records. A compulsive gambler with ties to underground poker games in Vancouver. And, according to a deeper search, Paige's boyfriend of at least 18 months. The timeline crystallized. Paige had met McGrath at a pharmaceutical conference. They'd started an affair. He'd introduced her to the world of medical fraud, fake prescriptions, insurance scams, offshore accounts. Together, they'd hatched a plan to kill Carson and disappear with $2 million. Simple, efficient, almost perfect. Almost. Carson sat back in his chair as the shock gave way to something colder. Something that had been honed by 12 years of documenting betrayal. Paige thought she'd married a forensic accountant, a number cruncher who followed paper trails. She'd underestimated what that really meant. Carson didn't just find evidence. He understood how criminals thought, how they planned, where they made mistakes. And he knew how to make them pay. Chapter 2. The Consultation. Carson didn't sleep. He sat in his office until dawn, methodically documenting everything. photographs of the gym bag contents, copies of the text messages, detailed notes on the bank records and Shell Corporation. He uploaded everything to an encrypted cloud server, created a dead man switch. If he didn't check in every 72 hours, the files would automatically send to law enforcement, and then archive the physical evidence in his office safe. By the time Paige came downstairs at 7, showered and dressed for work, Carson was making coffee in the kitchen. He'd practiced his expression in the bathroom mirror, pleasantly tired, vaguely distracted. The face of a man who suspected nothing. "You're up early," Paige said, kissing his cheek. Carson focused on the warmth of her lips, the familiar scent of her perfume, and felt nothing but cold calculation. Couldn't sleep. Big case wrapping up today. He poured her coffee, added cream the way she liked. "How about you? Sleep okay?" "Like a rock." She smiled, and Carson wondered how many times that smile had concealed thoughts of his death. "I've had a full day, 3 client meetings, then dinner with the district manager. Might be home late." "No problem. I'll probably work late too." Carson handed her the mug. "Paige, have I seemed off to you lately? Tired, maybe?" Her eyes widened with perfectly performed concern. "Actually, yes. I've been worried. You've had those headaches, and you're pale sometimes. Maybe you should see Dr. Morrison." Dr. Morrison, the physician whose name appeared on the falsified medical records. Carson filed that away. "Maybe I will. Good idea." He kissed her forehead. "Have a great day." After Paige left, Carson sat in the kitchen for exactly 5 minutes, processing the performance. Then he made 2 calls. The first was to his boss, Harley Blackwell. The old man answered on the first ring, gruff as always. "This better be important, Erickson. I'm in the middle of breakfast. I need a personal favor, Harley. Off the books." A pause. "You found something. I found everything. But I need help making it stick." Carson explained the situation in clinical terms, the way he'd present evidence in court. No emotion, just facts. Blackwell listened without interrupting, then whistled low. "Jesus, Carson, that's cold-blooded. I need to know my options. Legal ones first." "Legal? You've got enough to send her away for attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. But proving the poisoning is tricky. You need medical evidence, expert testimony." Her lawyer would argue the texts were fantasy, role play, whatever. Rich defendants walk on worse. And illegal options? Another pause. "I didn't hear that. But hypothetically, a man in your position might consider ensuring the punishment fits the crime. Poetic justice, some call it." Blackwell's voice hardened. "Whatever you're planning, be smart. Don't become the villain in your own story." "I don't plan to. I plan to be the architect." The second call was to an old contact from his university days, Neville Gardner, now a private investigator who specialized in surveillance and, when necessary, less conventional services. They met at a diner in Renton, far from Carson's usual haunts. Neville looked the same as he had 15 years ago, lean, sharp-eyed, with the relaxed posture of someone who'd seen everything. "You look like hell," Neville said, sliding into the booth. "Someone's trying to kill me. I need to return the favor." Neville's expression didn't change. "Explain." Carson laid out the evidence on his phone. Photos of the documents, screenshots of the texts. Neville scrolled through methodically, occasionally zooming in on details. When he finished, he set the phone down. "Your wife and her boyfriend are planning to murder you for insurance money. You have documented evidence. Why not just go to the cops?" "Because I want more than jail time. I want them destroyed." "Revenge is a dangerous game, Carson. This isn't revenge. It's justice." Carson leaned forward. "They plan to kill me slowly, make it look like an accident, then live on my life insurance while I rotted in the ground. I want them to feel what they did. I want them trapped by their own plan." Neville studied him for a long moment. "You've changed since college. You used to be the guy who followed rules. I still follow rules. I'm just choosing which ones matter." Carson's voice was steady. "Can you help or not? What do you need?" "Surveillance on both of them. I want to know everywhere they go, everyone they talk to. I want to understand their entire operation. How many people are involved, where the money is, what their escape plan looks like. And then I spring the trap." Neville pulled out a notepad. "I'll need names, addresses, known associates. This'll cost you. Money isn't an issue. I have access to their offshore accounts. Carson smiled without humor. Call it a down payment on their future. Over the next week, Carson lived a double life. At home, he was the oblivious husband, dutifully taking the vitamins Paige offered, which he now pocketed and later tested. They contained low doses of synthesized peanut proteins. At work, he was the meticulous investigator, building a case that would make the prosecution's job trivial. Neville's surveillance revealed the scope of the operation. Gregorio McGrath wasn't just Paige's boyfriend. He was a serial con artist who'd run similar schemes in 3 other states. His gambling debts had made him desperate, and Paige's pharmaceutical connections had made her the perfect partner. But they weren't working alone. The compounding pharmacist was Lyndon Kirby, a 60-year-old man drowning in medical bills from his wife's cancer treatment. McGrath had approached him with a simple proposition: create untraceable allergens, get paid enough to save his wife, ask no questions. The life insurance agent was Corey Waters, a mid-level salesman who'd falsified Carson's medical history in exchange for a cut of the payout. He'd created the peanut allergy diagnosis using a corrupt doctor in Tacoma named Ellis Crosby. It was a network. 5 people, all connected, all culpable. And Carson was going to take them all down. Chapter 3. The Performance. On the 8th day, Carson made his move. He called Paige during her lunch break, voice shaking with manufactured panic. "Honey, something's wrong. I'm at the office, and I'm having trouble breathing. My throat feels tight." "What?" "Carson, what did you eat?" "Just the sandwich you made this morning." "What?" Perfect silence. "Then, stay calm. I'm calling an ambulance." "Where exactly are you?" "Conference room B." "Paige, I'm scared." "Don't be. Help is coming. Just stay on the line with me." Carson listened to her voice, soothing, concerned, loving, and knew she was already calculating. This wasn't the plan. The acute exposure was supposed to happen at home, where she could control the scene. But an emergency at his office, in front of witnesses, with medical professionals responding immediately, this was a problem for her. He hung up and called 911 himself, describing symptoms of an allergic reaction. Then he called Harley Blackwell. "It's happening. Get everyone in position." "You're sure about this?" "Completely." The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. By then, Carson had taken an antihistamine to cause mild facial flushing and deliberately hyperventilated to create shallow breathing. The paramedics found him sitting in the conference room, looking genuinely distressed. "Sir, do you have any known allergies?" "No. I don't understand what's happening." They checked his vitals, administered oxygen, and transported him to Overlake Medical Center. Carson watched the ceiling of the ambulance, thinking about the performance ahead. At the hospital, doctors ran tests while Carson played the confused patient. Blood work came back showing elevated histamines, consistent with allergic reaction but not life-threatening. The ER physician, a tired woman named Dr. Whitaker, reviewed his chart with a frown. "Mr. Erickson, our tests show you've been exposed to peanut proteins. Are you sure you don't have a peanut allergy?" "Positive. I eat peanuts all the time. Had peanut butter toast 3 days ago." Dr. Whitaker's frown deepened. "That's odd. Your histamine levels suggest chronic low-level exposure, like someone building sensitivity. But if you're regularly consuming peanuts without reaction..." She made a note. "I'm going to have toxicology run a more detailed panel. Something's not adding up." Paige arrived 30 minutes later, breathless and perfectly distraught. She rushed to Carson's bedside, gripping his hand. "Oh my God, are you okay? They said allergic reaction, but you don't have allergies." "I don't know what happened." Carson squeezed her hand. "They're running more tests." Her eyes flickered to the medical equipment, the 4-line, the monitors. "Calculating. Did they say what you reacted to?" "Peanuts, apparently. But that doesn't make sense." Carson watched her process this. The plan had been to create the allergy over time, then trigger the fatal reaction at home with a massive dose. This hospital visit, these tests, the toxicology panel, none of this was supposed to happen. She smiled, stroking his hair. "The important thing is you're safe now. Let the doctors figure it out." "Yeah." Carson closed his eyes. "I'm just glad you're here." That night, after Paige reluctantly went home at Carson's insistence, "You need rest, honey, and I have early meetings," Neville Gardner visited the hospital wearing a visitor's badge that identified him as Carson's brother. The surveillance paid off, Neville said quietly. McGrath met with the pharmacist 2 hours ago. Panic conversation. They know the hospital tests might reveal the synthetic compounds. Good. Let them panic. Carson sat up in the hospital bed. What about the others? Waters, the insurance agent, tried to access your policy 3 times today. Probably trying to figure out if your hospitalization triggers any clauses. And the doctor, Crosby, received a call from a burner phone. Likely Page or McGrath warning him. They're scrambling. Perfect. Carson pulled out his own phone. Tomorrow, we tighten the noose. Ow! Carson showed him a document on his screen. I'm filing a claim with my insurance company for medical expenses related to poisoning. Not allergy, poisoning. That'll trigger an investigation. And I'm scheduling a meeting with a divorce attorney. Public record. Easy for them to discover. You want them to know you're onto them? I want them desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Carson's expression was cold. They plan to kill me slowly. I'm going to destroy them the same way, piece by piece, until they have nothing left. Neville studied him. You're enjoying this. No, I'm ensuring justice. There's a difference. Carson leaned back against the pillows. They thought I was just a number cruncher. They forgot that I've spent 12 years learning how criminals think, how they plan, where they fail. This is what I do, Neville. I find the truth and make it hurt. Just remember, there's a line between justice and revenge. Don't cross it for you can't come back. Carson didn't respond. Because he knew the truth. He'd already crossed it the moment he found that gym bag in Page's trunk. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was about making them pay in the exact currency of their crime. Chapter 4, The Unraveling. Carson was discharged from the hospital the next morning with prescriptions he wouldn't fill and instructions to avoid peanut products he'd never actually been allergic to. The toxicology report had come back showing trace amounts of modified proteins that warranted further investigation, which was code for something's wrong, but we can't prove what yet. Perfect. He returned home to find Paige in the kitchen, preparing lunch with visible tension in her shoulders. She brightened when she saw him, but Carson could read the calculation behind her eyes now. He'd become fluent in her deceptions. Welcome home. I made chicken soup, nothing that could possibly trigger allergies. She kissed him, and Carson tasted the desperation beneath the performance. Thanks, honey. The doctor said they're not sure what caused the reaction. Might have been environmental. He sat at the kitchen table, watching her move. They recommended I see a specialist, an allergist, and maybe a toxicologist. Paige's hand trembled slightly as she stirred the soup. A toxicologist. Yeah, apparently when allergic reactions don't match known allergen exposure, they sometimes test for environmental toxins, or, he paused deliberately, synthesized compounds. The spoon clattered against the pot. That seems excessive. That's what I thought. But the hospital's being cautious. Something about liability if they miss something. Carson pulled out his phone. Oh, and I got a weird call from our insurance company. They want to review my policy because of the hospital claim. Review it why? Standard procedure, they said. Making sure all the information is accurate. Medical history, beneficiaries, coverage amounts. He looked up at her. Is there any reason it wouldn't be? Of course not. Paige's smile was rigid. I'll call them tomorrow and sort it out. Carson nodded, returning to his phone while internally cataloging her tells. She was scared. Good. That afternoon, while Paige was at a client meeting, actually a panicked rendezvous with McGrath at a hotel in Bellevue, according to Neville's surveillance, Carson visited the offices of Willard Singleton, a divorce attorney with a reputation for aggressive litigation. Singleton was a heavy-set man in his 60s with permanent frown lines and the cynical eyes of someone who'd seen too many marriages implode. He listened to Carson's story without interruption, occasionally making notes. You have evidence of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud, Singleton said finally. Most people in your position would go straight to the police. I want to understand my options first. Smart. Here's the reality. You file for divorce now, and your wife's attorney will claim you're fabricating evidence out of spite. Even with the texts and documents, a good lawyer could muddy the waters, argue the messages were fantasy, The bank accounts were legitimate business investments. The insurance policy was standard financial planning. So I wait for her to actually try to kill me? No. You build an airtight case that leaves no room for interpretation. Singleton leaned forward. You need her to make a move that can't be explained away. Something concrete, witnessed, undeniable. I'm working on it. I assumed you were. Singleton pulled out a contract. If you hire me, I can file the preliminary paperwork, financial disclosures, asset inventories, restraining orders if needed. We keep it ready to deploy the moment you give the word. Carson signed a contract. One more thing. I need you to leak this to specific people. Leak what? That I've hired you. That I'm planning to file for divorce. I want my wife and her boyfriend to know I'm taking action. Singleton's eyebrows rose. That's unconventional. Usually, we want the element of surprise. I don't want surprise. I want pressure. Carson stood. Can you do it? It's your money. I'll make some calls to colleagues who gossip. Word will spread. By evening, the trap was set. Carson knew from Neville's surveillance that McGrath had contacts in the legal community, a lawyer friend who'd helped him with previous schemes. Singleton's leak would reach McGrath within 24 hours. Now Carson just had to wait for them to panic. He didn't have to wait long. At 11 p.m., while Carson pretended to sleep, Paige's phone buzzed with a text. She slipped out of bed and into the bathroom. Carson heard the shower turn on, white noise to cover a conversation. He'd installed a listening device in the bathroom 2 days ago. Now he listened through an earbud hidden under his pillow. Can't believe he hired a divorce lawyer. Paige's voice was shrill with stress. How did he find out? McGrath's voice crackled through the phone. He doesn't know everything, or he'd have gone to the cops. He probably suspects an affair, nothing more. What if he's seen the accounts? What if he knows about the insurance? Then we move up the timeline. No more slow poisoning. We do this now before he can file. How? The hospital visit screwed everything up. They're watching for symptoms now. Accidents happen, Paige. Houses catch fire. Brakes fail. People fall downstairs. McGrath's voice was cold. We have 1 week to make this look random, collect the insurance, and disappear. Can you handle it? Silence. Then, yes, I can handle it. Good. I'll talk to Kirby about accelerants. Untraceable ones. And I'll arrange our exit. Flights out of Vancouver under false names, rental house in Costa Rica. But you need to hold it together. Don't let Carson see you sweat. I won't. I'll be the perfect grieving widow. The shower turned off. Carson removed the earbud and closed his eyes, feigning sleep as Paige returned to bed. She settled beside him, her breathing eventually slowing to sleep rhythms. Carson stared at the ceiling, processing what he'd heard. They were accelerating, moving from months to days, which meant he needed to move faster. He waited until 2 a.m., then slipped out of bed and downstairs to his office. A new email waited from Neville. Surveillance photos of McGrath meeting with Lyndon Kirby, the pharmacist, outside a warehouse in Tacoma. Time-stamped 1 hour ago. Carson opened the attached file. The photos showed Kirby handing McGrath a package, both men looking nervous. Neville's note read, chemical analysis pending, but based on their conversation, attached audio, the package contains industrial accelerants designed to mimic electrical fire starters. They were planning to burn down the house with him in it. Carson sat back, calculating. He could go to the police now. He had enough evidence to arrest everyone involved. But arrest meant trials, lawyers, plea deals. Rich defendants sometimes walked, sometimes got reduced sentences. No, he wanted guaranteed justice, and he knew exactly how to get it. He pulled up the encrypted files on Gregorio McGrath's gambling debts. $200,000 owed to a Vancouver syndicate run by a man named Horace Dickerson. Brutal enforcers. Zero patience for debtors. Carson had discovered the debt during his initial investigation and filed it away as potentially useful. Now it was time to deploy it. He drafted an anonymous email to Dickerson's organization. Detailed information on McGrath's offshore accounts, recent movements, and plans to flee to Costa Rica within the week. He attached bank statements showing McGrath had access to over $2.3 million, more than enough to pay his debts with interest. The email's implication was clear. McGrath was about to disappear with money that could have been used to settle his obligations. Carson hit send, then created a second email. This one went to the DEA, anonymously reporting suspicious activity at the compounding pharmacy, illegal synthesis of controlled substances, falsified prescriptions, insurance fraud. He included enough detail to trigger an investigation, but not enough to reveal his involvement. The third email went to the Washington State Insurance Commissioner. Evidence of policy fraud, false medical histories, and planned insurance murder. He attached the forged documents from Paige's trunk and the text messages between her and McGrath. The fourth went to the medical board. Documentation of Dr. Ellis Crosby's involvement in creating false allergy diagnoses, including photographic evidence and phone records. 5 emails total, each triggering a different investigation, each aimed at a different member of the conspiracy. Carson sat back and watched the digital paper trail ignite. By morning, 5 separate organizations would be moving against his would-be killers. The beauty was that none of them would know about the others. Each investigation would proceed independently, creating overlapping pressure that would be impossible to escape. Chapter 5. The Collapse. The first domino fell at 9 a.m. when Lyndon Kirby's pharmacy was raided by DEA agents. Carson watched the news coverage from his office, sipping coffee while reporters described an ongoing investigation into illegal pharmaceutical manufacturing. Kirby was arrested on site. The accelerants were found in his lab. The second domino fell at noon when Dr. Ellis Crosby's medical license was suspended pending investigation. The medical board had moved with unusual speed, likely because Carson's evidence included testimony from 3 other patients Crosby had defrauded. By 2 p.m., the insurance commissioner had flagged Paige's policy and frozen the payout pending fraud investigation. Corey Waters, the insurance agent, was placed on administrative leave. Carson received updates from Neville throughout the day. McGrath just got a visit from 2 very large men with Vancouver accents. He looked terrified. Paige has called the pharmacy 17 times. No answer. Waters is trying to leave town. Someone slashed his tires. The conspiracy was imploding in real time. At 6 p.m., Paige came home early, her face pale and makeup smudged. Carson was in the living room, reading a book, The Picture of Domestic Calm. "Hey, honey, you're home early. I need to tell you something." Paige sat down heavily. "There's been a misunderstanding with your insurance policy. The company is claiming there's fraud, which is insane, but they've frozen everything pending investigation." Carson frowned. "Fraud? What kind of fraud?" "I don't know. Something about false medical histories." She was shaking. "Carson, I swear I had nothing to do with this. Someone must have made a mistake." "I believe you." He took her hand, feeling the tremor in her fingers. "We'll sort out. I'll call the company tomorrow." "There's more." She pulled her hand away. "That pharmacist I told you about, Lyndon Kirby? He was arrested today. DEA raid. They're saying he manufactured illegal compounds." "Jesus. You knew him?" "Professionally. He filled some prescriptions for my clients." Paige stood pacing. "This is a nightmare. Everything's falling apart." Carson watched her unravel, feeling nothing. "Maybe you should call Gregorio. Didn't you say he knows people in the pharmaceutical industry? Maybe he can help figure out what's going on." Paige froze. "Gregorio? Your colleague, the one you've been working with?" Carson's voice was perfectly innocent. "Unless you don't think he can help?" "No, I'll call him." She grabbed her phone and went upstairs. Carson waited 5 minutes, then checked the listening device. Paige's voice was frantic. "Gregorio, everything's collapsing. Kirby's arrested. The insurance is frozen. Crosby's license is suspended." "I know." McGrath's voice was sharp with panic. "And I've got bigger problems. Dickerson's people found me. They know about the offshore accounts. They want their money now, or they'll kill me. What about our plan?" "The plan is dead. We can't touch the life insurance. The pharmacy's gone. Half our network is under investigation. We need to cut our losses and run." "Run where?" "How? I don't know. A crash, like something thrown. This wasn't supposed to happen. Someone burned us. Someone knew everything." Long silence. Then Paige, slowly. "Carson hired a divorce lawyer. So what if he knows more than we thought? What if he's been investigating us? He's an accountant, not a detective. He couldn't have orchestrated this. But Carson heard the doubt in McGrath's voice. The first seeds of realization. That night, Carson received a text from Neville. Dickerson's people picked up McGrath. He's going to pay his debts one way or another. Carson allowed himself a small smile. That problem was solved. The next morning, Paige was gone when Carson woke up. No note, no message. He found her phone on the kitchen counter. She'd left it behind, probably realizing it could be tracked. She was running. Carson called Neville. She bolted. Can you find her? Already on it. She withdrew cash from 3 ATMs last night, then headed south on I-5. I'm tracking her through traffic cameras. Where's she going? Best guess. Portland. Her sister Jana lives there. A pause. You want me to stop her? Carson considered. No. Let her go to her sister's. I'll handle it personally. Because this was the final piece. The confrontation. The moment when Paige would understand exactly how thoroughly she'd been beaten. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. Carson drove to Portland that afternoon, taking his time. He stopped for coffee in Olympia, lunch in Centralia, using the hours to prepare what he'd say. Jana Kraus lived in a modest house in the Selwood neighborhood. Carson had met her a dozen times over the years. A quieter, more grounded version of Paige, divorced and working as a teacher. She'd always been kind to him. He felt bad about what he was going to do to her afternoon. Carson knocked at 3 p.m. Jana answered, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness. Carson, what are you doing here? Is Paige here? How did you know? Can I come in? Jana hesitated, then stepped aside. Carson entered to find Paige sitting at the kitchen table, looking exhausted and terrified. She stood when she saw him. Carson, I can don't. He held up a hand. I'm going to talk. You're going to listen. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table, then opened the file containing the text messages, bank records, insurance documents, and surveillance photos. 3 months ago, you and Gregorio McGrath began planning to murder me. You were going to poison me slowly with synthesized peanut allergens, create a medical history of allergies I didn't have, then trigger a fatal reaction and collect $2 million in life insurance. Paige's face went white. Jana gasped. You enlisted a pharmacist named Lyndon Kirby to manufacture the compounds. A doctor named Ellis Crosby to falsify medical records. An insurance agent named Corey Waters to process the fraudulent policy. You opened offshore accounts, planned your escape to Costa Rica, and spent the last 90 days systematically poisoning my food. Carson, I said don't. His voice was ice. I found your gym bag in the trunk. I read every message. I documented every transaction. I know everything. Tears streamed down Paige's face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was Gregorio's idea. I don't care whose idea it was. You went along with it. You smiled at me every morning while planning my death. Carson leaned forward. But here's what you didn't know. I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent 12 years learning how criminals think, how they operate, where they make mistakes. And you made so many mistakes. He stood pacing. You thought I was just a number cruncher. You forgot that I specialize in finding hidden money, uncovering fraud, documenting conspiracies. You handed me every piece of evidence I needed. What are you going to do? Paige whispered. I already did it. Carson smiled without warmth. Kirby is in federal custody for manufacturing illegal compounds. Crosby lost his medical license and is facing criminal charges for fraud. Waters is being prosecuted for insurance fraud. The offshore accounts are frozen. The insurance policy is voided. And Gregorio? Gregorio had gambling debts to a Vancouver crime syndicate. I informed them he was planning to flee the country with money that could have paid them back. They collected him yesterday. I don't think you'll be seeing him again. Paige collapsed into a chair. Jana stood frozen, processing. As for you, Carson continued, you have 2 options. Option 1. I go to the police right now with everything I have. You're arrested for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and wire fraud. You'll spend the next 20 years in prison. Or, option 2, you sign a confession. You testify against everyone involved. You agree to a divorce with 0 claim to any assets. You accept a 5-year prison sentence on reduced charges. And you live with the knowledge that you tried to kill your husband and failed because you underestimated him. Paige stared at him. That's not much of a choice. It's more than you gave me. You were going to murder me and take everything I'd worked for. I'm offering you a chance to salvage something. A shorter sentence, a chance at a future someday. Carson's expression hardened. But make no mistake, you'll pay for what you did. Jana finally spoke. Carson, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I know. You're not part of this. He looked at Paige. Decide now. Prison for 20 years or prison for 5. Those are your options. Paige's shoulders slumped. I'll take option 2. Smart choice. Carson pulled out documents he'd prepared. The confession, the divorce agreement, the cooperation agreement with prosecutors. Sign these. Then pack your things. We're driving back to Seattle tonight. You'll turn yourself in tomorrow morning. Paige signed with shaking hands. Jana watched, tears streaming down her face. As they drove back to Seattle that evening, the silence was heavy. Carson didn't speak. Neither did Paige. There was nothing left to say. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. The prosecutions moved swiftly. With Paige's testimony and Carson's evidence, the case against the conspiracy was airtight. Lyndon Kirby, facing 30 years for manufacturing illegal substances, took a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for testifying against the others. His wife's cancer treatment continued under a victim's compensation fund, a small mercy Carson had quietly arranged. Kirby had been coerced. He deserved punishment, but not complete destruction. Dr. Ellis Crosby fought the charges, hiring an expensive legal team and claiming the forged documents were created without his knowledge. The jury didn't believe him. He was convicted of medical fraud and conspiracy, sentenced to 12 years, and ordered to pay $500,000 in restitution. His career was over. Corey Waters, the insurance agent, flipped immediately. He testified about the entire scheme in exchange for probation and permanent revocation of his insurance license. He'd been a small player, motivated by greed rather than malice. Carson considered his cooperation and didn't push for prison time. Gregorio McGrath never faced trial. His body was found in a Vancouver landfill 3 weeks after Dickerson's people collected him. The official investigation concluded it was gang-related violence. No one looked too closely. Carson felt nothing when he heard. Paige served exactly 5 years at the Washington Correction Center for Women. Carson never visited. He received 1 letter from her, 2 years into her sentence. Carson, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to, but I need you to know that I regret everything. Not just because I got caught, but because I destroyed something real. You were a good man, and I repaid your trust with betrayal. I deserve every day I spend here. I'm sorry. Carson filed the letter without responding. Apologies were meaningless. Actions defined people, and her actions had shown him exactly who she was. The divorce was finalized while Paige was incarcerated. Carson kept everything: the house, the investments, the life they'd built. He donated her belongings to charity and repainted every room she'd touched. The insurance company paid him $50,000 in compensation for the fraud, which he donated to a victims' advocacy group. He didn't want money that came from her crimes. Chapter 8. The Rebuilding. 2 years after Paige's arrest, Carson sat in his office at Blackwell & Associates, reviewing a case file. The work continued, following paper trails, uncovering fraud, documenting betrayal. But something had changed in how he approached it. He understood the victims better now. The shock of discovery, the feeling of violation, the cold realization that someone you trusted had been planning your destruction. Harley Blackwell noticed. You've gotten better at this, he said one afternoon, dropping a new case on Carson's desk. More empathetic, less clinical. I learned the hard way that betrayal isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. You also learned you're smarter than most criminals. That ego talking or fact? Carson smiled. Fact. But it's not about being smart. It's about being thorough. People make mistakes when they think they're untouchable. Like your wife. Like my ex-wife. Carson opened the new file. What's this one? Tech CEO hiding assets from his wife through cryptocurrency. Think you can find them? Without question. The case took 3 weeks. Carson found the hidden wallets, traced the transactions through blockchain, and documented everything. The wife got her fair settlement. Justice delivered methodically. At night, Carson returned to the house in Bellevue. He'd considered selling it, but decided against it. This was his home. Paige's betrayal didn't get to take that from him. He dated occasionally a teacher named Sophie Martinez, a lawyer named Teresa Glass. Nothing serious. He wasn't ready for serious, and he was honest about that. They appreciated his directness. Neville Gardner became a regular lunch companion. They'd meet at the Renton Diner monthly, discussing cases and life. "You ever regret how it went down?" Neville asked during one lunch. "No. They planned to murder me. They got exactly what they deserved." "Even McGrath?" Carson considered. "I didn't kill him. I just made sure the people he already owed found him. His death is on him." "That's a fine line." "Maybe, but I sleep fine at night." Carson sipped his coffee. "They made their choices. I just ensured those choices had consequences." Chapter 9. The Closure. 5 years and 2 months after finding the gym bag in Paige's trunk, Carson received a call from the Washington Correction Center. Paige was being released on parole. Did he want to be notified of her movements? No, she's not my problem anymore. He hung up and returned to his current case, a hedge fund manager embezzling from investors. The pattern was elegant, small amounts over years, hidden in legitimate-looking transactions. Carson was pulling the thread that would unravel everything. That evening, as Carson reviewed bank statements in his home office, his doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, he saw Paige. She looked older, thinner, with gray streaks in her hair. She wore jeans and a plain sweater. No makeup. She held a small bag, probably everything she owned. Carson opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I just needed to say something in person." Paige's voice was steady. "You were right about everything. I was greedy, selfish, and cruel. I tried to kill you for money, and I destroyed both our lives in the process. You destroyed your life. I rebuilt mine." "I know." She looked at the house, the repainted exterior, the new landscaping, the obvious improvements. "You made it better." "Good. Is that all?" "No. I need to know, did you ever love me? Or was I always just a mistake you corrected?" Carson thought about the question, about the woman he'd married at the courthouse, who'd laughed at his dark humor and promised honesty, about the stranger who'd poisoned his food while smiling. "I love who I thought you were. That person didn't exist." Paige nodded slowly. "That's fair. For what it's worth, I loved you too. The real you. Which makes what I did even worse." "It does. I'm leaving Seattle, starting over somewhere else. You'll never see me again." "Good." Paige turned to go, then paused. "You know what the worst part is? You gave me everything I said I wanted: stability, honesty, partnership. And I threw it away for money and excitement with a con artist. I was an idiot." "Yes, you were." She smiled sadly. "I hope you find someone who deserves you, Carson. Someone who appreciates what you are, smart, thorough, and absolutely terrifying when crossed." "I'm not looking." "You should. Don't let what I did make you stop trusting people." She walked down the driveway. "Goodbye, Carson." He watched her disappear down the street, then closed the door. Paige was right about one thing. He'd made the house better. New paint, new furniture, new memories. He'd hosted Harley's retirement party here last year. Had Neville and his wife over for dinner regularly. The place felt like his again. Carson returned to his office and the hedge fund case. Numbers didn't lie. Patterns revealed truth. And somewhere in these bank statements was the evidence that would bring down another criminal. It's what he did, what he was good at. His phone buzzed. A text from Teresa Glass, the lawyer he'd been seeing. "Dinner tomorrow? I'll cook." He smiled and typed back, "I'll bring wine." Maybe Paige was right about that too. Maybe it was time to start trusting again. Carefully, methodically, with his eyes open, but only with someone who understood what he'd learned. That betrayal left scars, but it also taught you exactly what you wouldn't tolerate. And Carson Erickson would never again underestimate what he was capable of when someone threatened what was his. The hedge fund manager was going down. The pattern was clear now. $47,000 moved through shell accounts over 18 months. Carson